A senior official involved in Cameroon's hosting of the Africa Cup of Nations has assured that separatist rebels pose no threat to the tournament, which begins on Sunday. Ngamba Emmanuel Ledoux admitted this last week that groups fighting for the independence of Anglophone Cameroon set off an explosion in the town of Limbe, which will host some of the games. But he said that government had introduced security measures to stop the rebels from attacking the event or the nearby town of Boué, where some of the players are expected to stay. Ledoux says that Cameroon has organized the African Cup of Nations Championships last year within the same environment, and the country has been in a 5-year-old conflict between the government and Anglophone separatists. Well, for a little bit of analysis on this situation, we're now joined by Professor Hermann Ndofor, who's from the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. He's a Templeton Fellow and Senior Associate Editor of the Africa Journal of Management, and he joins us now via Zoom. Prof, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. My pleasure, and a Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Was it a risk to hold the African Cup of Nations in Cameroon, do you think?
Oh, yes, definitely, right? This is a conflict area. It's just not any conflict. It's a war zone, not only in Limbe or Boya, but most of Cameroon is. And it was an inherent risk. It's quite sad that the tournament has been allowed to go on. But there is no doubt that there is a huge risk, not only to the visitors or the players, but also the residents, right? So the players may likely get to play, but at the cost of undue hardship to the residents who live in Limbe and Boya.
Do you think then we'll see more unrest, more disruptions over the course of the tournament?
Oh, yes, I will suspect so. I should make note here that the restoration fighters, this conflict has been going on for 4 years. There was fighting in Limbe and Boya last week. There was fighting this week, and there will likely be fighting next week. And it really has nothing to do with the tournament, right? So it's a conflict area. There will be fighting, which means there is risk to anybody who participates in the tournament. But the risk does not necessarily, in fact, in my view, the risk does not come from the restoration fighters. There are 3 elements of risk we find with this tournament. The first comes directly from the Cameroon security forces. To have these games go on in Limbe and Boya, the heart of the conflict zone, means these areas have to be put on lockdown. Yesterday, the administrator himself banned movement of all motorcycles and a majority of cars. So essentially, for these games to take place, the citizens of the towns are essentially under house arrest. But many of them would likely be killed when the government engages the restoration fighters who had been fighting before, right? So that is the big risk we see here to the civilian population itself. The players likely would be fine because they will be under heavy military escort to and from the stadium. The casualties would be on, unfortunately, poor local residents who have already been suffering under the weight of this war. The second risk comes not necessarily in the southern Cameroon section, Boya and Limbe, but actually in Douala and Yaoundé. There are great fears that the government itself would likely perpetrate some sort of an attack to blame on the southern Cameroonians. They have been doing this in the past in Kumba, where there was actually shooting at a school, in hospitals where government forces engaged and tried to get international sympathy by blaming southern Cameroon fighters. So the second greatest fear is that the government itself, through a 5th column of elements, may perpetrate some act as the means of arousing international sympathy and antagonism against southern Cameroonians. The third is real legitimate terrorism, right? We live in very terrible times, I may say, where there are terrorists. And in this particular area, the past year, what we have seen is the Cameroon government has been bringing in Boko Haram elements, I would say from the Taraba state in Nigeria, from Adamawa, down to aspect elements of southern Cameroon to use as proxy fighters. And they have been promised in general that any land they clear of southern Cameroonians can become theirs. That has mostly taken part in the Donga Mountain section of the northwest region, but there are fears that these are Boko Haram elements. They can perpetuate terrorism at the least opportunity they are given. And so this poses a risk to everybody in the area when you start incorporating elements of jihadism into such a tournament.
You know, we use this term, excuse me, separatist movements, and often it's quite a blanket term, but it's a little bit more complex than that, isn't it? We've got different groups, perhaps with the same goal at the end, particularly in the Anglophone part of the country, but not necessarily on the same page. I'm thinking of the Ambazonia government and then some of the more extreme separatist groups.
Yes, like in any society, the Anglophone Cameroon or Southern Cameroon is pluralistic. So there are multiple groups, but one of the things you find across all the groups, different surveys that have been taken out, is there is unanimity of goal. Day one restoration of Southern Cameroon independence. For that, I don't think there is any daylight between the groups. The means of getting that, there might be some differences, but that is not surprising, right? Here in the United States, we have two major parties that don't see eye to eye with each other. Many areas in the world, South Africa included, there is multi-partyism. Unfortunately, sometimes multi-partyism in an active conflict area means you have several groups all armed with different, I'll call ideologies. But in this case, I think the one thing that makes this case unique is all the armed groups have a consensus on the goal. The means of attaining that goal and how severe they go about attacking the government might be different, but their goal is, I would say there's conformity of goal.
Having a multinational tournament taking place in Cameroon at this time, this means that a lot of eyes will be on Cameroon. Could this be an opportunity then for these restoration groups and parties to make their cause more known in various ways? And this could set up conflict with the government.
That is tough for me to say, right? I would really hope that a soccer tournament like this, ill-advised as it may, should be actually used as a way to accelerate peace. And it is not strange, it is not new that soccer or football has been used as a means of bridging peace, right? In 1914, there was the Christmas truce between the warring factions where they played a soccer game. More recently, we can see in Ivory Coast, Didier Drogba and the soccer team were very instrumental in bringing peace to the country. What we pray CAF should have done is use this tournament to bring peace to Cameroon. They could have called for the government, for example, to have a ceasefire and talk to the restoration fighters to honor the ceasefire during the tournament. They could have asked the government to release all the political prisoners. The government currently holds no less than 5,000 Southern Cameroonians in very horrendous conditions, all detained for asking for more liberty. CAF could have asked for them to be released as a goodwill gesture, right? More importantly, the personalities involved, I think here of the new FECAFOOT president, Samuel Eto'o, could follow the footsteps of his counterpart, Didier Drogba, and be a catalyst of peace in this country. But unfortunately, I would say that the early signs are really not auspicious, right? Samuel Eto'o, unfortunately, has taken upon himself to exacerbate the crisis. He was in Boya and Limbe a couple of weeks ago, making provocatory videos, what the local population found as provocatory. He named as his main media lead a gentleman called Ernest Obama, who has many times on television called Southern Cameroonians rats and called for their extermination. So while the opportunity is there, I really fear that neither CAF nor FECAFOOT or the Cameroon government is really taking advantage of this opportunity to bring peace. It is difficult to put the onus on the restoration fighters because most of them are in their homes, are in the bushes, and they are in a defensive posture. It is very difficult to always ask somebody in defense to say you unilaterally have a ceasefire when you are in defense. That might actually be a suicide mission. The onus is on the international community and the Cameroon government to take the lead. Let's declare a ceasefire during the tournament. Let the military go back to their barracks. Then we can turn around and ask the restoration fighters to respect the ceasefire.
We know the people of Cameroon love their football. They've had some superstars over time. You've talked about Eto'o, but we also had Roger Milla over time as well. The team itself, is it representative of Cameroon in its entirety? Are people behind the entire team?
That is really difficult to say. Like many aspects of Cameroon, the national team itself is mired in tribalism, right? So the team is not as representative of the country, but it is also difficult to ask the people who are really bearing the burden of this conflict to watch soccer. Most of them don't have electricity or means to go to the soccer games. Most of them, I mean, in southern Cameroon, for example, all travel has been stopped. You go to the northern part of the country where there is Boko Haram activity, the same situation you find there. So this is really a tournament for the elites to enjoy the football, which is really, once again, football is a sport for the people. It's a common man's game. Anybody can go out with a rubber ball and kick it around. But in this case, it has really been changed to just entertainment for the elites.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for your insights on this AFCON and the security situation in the country. Let's hope, though, that peace prevails. Thank you for your time, Prof.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Right. Thank you. That's Professor Ndofor speaking to us from the United States.